Good morning, Tampa. Okay, we have a reading this morning. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all, once again, that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Blessed be.
For our meditation today, let us open our minds and our hearts to a place of quiet, to the silent prayers for the healing of pain, and to the soft, gentle coming of love, open to forgiveness, to acceptance for yourself and for all other beings. I invite you now to relax, get comfortable, close your eyes if you choose to do so. Taking a slow, deep breath. As you do, breathe in love. As you breathe out compassion. Take another slow, deep breath. This time, as you breathe in spiritual health. And then breathe out happiness. And take a third deep breath. Breathe in physical happiness. And breathe out unconditional acceptance for yourself and for all others. Take another deep breath, please. And as you breathe in this time, be thinking of the conflicts around the world, in the Middle East, Haiti, Ukraine, wherever there's conflicts, in Tampa, anywhere that there's conflicts. Breathe in that. And as you breathe out, please, send them some peace, some acceptance, love, and healing. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be helpful and well. May we be contented and happy. Namaste.
Well, that song brings back some memories, but it also seems very much up to date. So if you're an old generation, maybe you can remember that song, and if you're a new generation, welcome to the present moment. Things haven't changed all that much. Maybe that's what we'll talk about today. But today I did want to say a few words about art and religion, spiritual matters. But I'm not going to say anything especially about Salvador Dali or El Greco or Michelangelo or Rembrandt or any of those people. We're going to talk about artist activism. And when we talk about artist activists, we're talking about people like you. Okay, you up there, you're included too in all this. All right. We're talking about art of, by, and for the people. Sometimes it's very spontaneous, or maybe it seems spontaneous. It's expressed in different ways. So we could talk about painters, poets, we could talk about sculpture, murals, murals especially. We have lots of murals nowadays over in St. Petersburg. Do you have murals over here? Okay. All right. That's often an expression that comes from artist activists. And these are some of the things that deserve some special mention today, and of course, music especially. I'll say a few words about not the great classics necessarily, but I'll talk about participatory music, where you're part of the celebration. Now, art is one of those terms like spirituality or God or moral behavior or instinctive behavior. You know, it's really hard to pin it down. You know, what are we talking about when we talk about art? And there are a great many definitions. But speaking from personal experience, the first great art teacher for myself, and this was more than 50 years ago, maybe this is another name some of you folks may remember, Sir Kenneth Clark. All right, Sir Kenneth Clark. I never met Sir Kenneth, never expected to meet him in the flesh. He was an Englishman, very distinguished art historian and critic, and seemed very remote in some ways from my experience. And yet he understood art. At one point he said, art is the religion older than religion. All right, what do you think of that? Art is the religion older than religion. Okay. He emphasized that art is the continuing quest for beauty, and he identified beauty with perfection. And that made quite an impression on me as a young man. And I'm not sure I entirely agree with it nowadays. I don't know if all of us, or even many of us, are looking for perfection, but we're often looking for a better way of being in the world, sometimes just expressing our experiences in the world, telling our stories and singing our songs. That's a lot of what art activism is about. Leo Tolstoy, if you remember him from way back, okay, Leo Tolstoy said, art is about emotion and the expression of emotion. And then, of course, he discussed the full range of emotions. So we could talk about happiness, we could talk about compassion, we could talk about being fearful, uneasy, we could talk about being joyful, careful, caregiving, the full range of emotions. And you'll find them expressed in art, and of course some are perhaps more profound than others. Some artists are memorable, some are not. Some are very transient. Some of them stay with us for a long time, and we're not always sure why. But there was something in that particular painting or that particular song or poem, scenery, whatever, something in that particular moment that stays with us. Maybe it's great art. But let me tell you about a different kind of experience, and this is a very personal experience, and I don't know how deep I want to go with this presentation. I'm a little bit apprehensive, but we'll see what happens. There's been a double tragedy in my family, the family that I've married into. First of all, there was the death of my brother-in-law, Kenny, who was an old man, and his death was expected for quite some time, certainly more than a year, and he died a peaceful death. And that was a tragedy in its own way. And then his daughter died very soon thereafter, and that was unexpected. And that hit people very hard. So we're talking about a double tragedy. Now, I should mention that the family is the Dalzell family, which is a very prominent family in West Virginia, prominent for several generations. And at this point in history, members of the family are scattered all over North America. So what you have is kind of a family reunion, and then there are many other people present who are not family members. They might have been co-workers in the past, or neighbors, friends, whatever, all coming together in this little town in West Virginia. Nowadays it's called Moundsville, but long ago it was called Grave Creek. And the reason it was called Grave Creek is because there's a number of Indian mounds in the area, burial mounds. So for some reason, this has been the center for memorials for well over 1,000 years. Ironically, I've been reading a book about local archaeology, and I have it out in the automobile if you're really that curious. As you get into some of these ancient graves, and these are hundreds of years old, long before the white people showed up, there is a mask, and this is an incredible coincidence. It looks very much like this, and it's called the Weeping Face Mask. It's often engraved in bits of metal or shell that's been brought in from the coast. The weeping face. And then archaeologists get to argue over what does this represent? What's this all about? And of course, you have different theories. Maybe it represents an animal or a bird or something. But I leave that to your imagination. We did not gather yesterday in West Virginia to think about the distant past. Maybe we should have, but we didn't. We talked about Ashley Dalzell, the young woman recently deceased, and why she was important to all of us, why we had come together, not just to pay our respects and share memories, but really to try to comfort each other and to be supportive, to just be in the right emotional space at the right time. Now, you need to know that people at this gathering in West Virginia are coming from many different spaces, and I don't mean that in a geographic sense alone. So we have people with different values, different outlooks on life, different politics certainly, different religious experiences, different expectations as to what is going to happen at a memorial service, what ought to happen. And all of these people are coming in from their different places, and then they're all assembled like this, just as you're assembled today. And the task is a task for artist activists. How do we create an appropriate memorial service? Now, there's no particular formula that we can use because there's so much variety present. So what are we going to do? Well, we share poetry that seems appropriate, that the family has chosen. And we share a lot of memories. And people are just invited to come forward and tell their stories. What do they remember about Ashley? What is it that they want others to know? And I would say that this too is a form of art. I wouldn't call it a science. It may not be very rational or certainly not highly structured, but it is an expression of emotion, a sharing of grief, but other things enter into it as well. We hope for the future. We hope that people can come together more often, join together as one community. We hope it happens. It's a family reunion. Some people coming together for the family reunion were not sure how they were going to be received. Would they even be welcomed? But everybody was welcomed. A Christian evangelical, he had his comments which he sent. I was with a Roman Catholic couple at one point, and they had their comments. Things that they didn't know if it would be well accepted or not, but we tried to bring everybody together. We went out to Riverview Cemetery. This was yesterday at about 2 o'clock. And we said goodbye to Ashley. Now, there's an old custom which probably comes from somewhere in Europe, speaking to the bees, or telling it to the bees. And it's a custom in some parts of Appalachia, too. We're talking about the bees that make honey. And in some communities, some families certainly, they're regarded as, well, part of the family. They make honey. Some people long ago thought that they wouldn't be back and forth between different worlds to bring messages, and they wanted to know what was happening. That's what people believed in the old days. So we're at Riverview. We had many flowers, and guess what happened? The bees appeared, wild bees. So I said, let them know that Ashley's not with us anymore. Let them know. They'll take the message out. I think some people thought I was just chattering away, but it's an old custom, and it seemed very appropriate to keep it in mind. There's an old saying that when you go into a religious building, and I mean any kind, so we can talk about mosques, synagogues, Buddhist temples, go to the Mormon temple, wherever you might go, you will know in less than 15 minutes, and it may be less than 5 in some cases, if you're in the right place, if you're going to be welcomed here or not. And it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with sermons. The minister, the priest, the imam may not even be around at that point. Doesn't have a lot to do with elaborate creeds or catechisms or dogmas or anything like that. They may or may not be displayed, maybe doesn't matter. But there's things that are hard to explain. Visual cues, things that you hear, sometimes even smell, that will tell you whether or not you're in the right place. Now, with that thought in mind, I'll tell you about 3 religious places where I've been in my life that made a difference to me, and then when you go home, you may want to think about your own experiences. Where did you feel welcomed and accepted as you are? Where did you feel that you could tell your stories and listen to others as they are? For me, in my adult life, the first place that made a very profound impression, I was a student in San Francisco, Glide Memorial Church. All right. Glide Memorial Church was a downtown Methodist church, and it had been falling apart for years. I mean, there were Sundays where maybe a dozen people would show up at Glide. It was kind of a rough area, very close into downtown, with all that implies for San Francisco. And then a young minister named Cecil Williams took over at Glide. Very radical Methodist, African-American, radical, early 60s. And Cecil transformed the place. One of the first things he did, this is a Methodist church at that point, there were crosses on the wall. You can remember that? Those of you with a Protestant background? Would have been a crucifix in a Catholic church. Cecil said, take them down. Because many of the people who are going to come here have already been crucified in this community. They don't need to see that. They know what that experience is like. And all kinds of people did come, hundreds and hundreds. And over the years, there would sometimes even be a waiting line just to get into church on Sunday morning. So try to imagine that experience. I often went to Glide. I had no intention of becoming a Methodist. I never did become a Methodist. Disagreed probably with all kinds of points, theological points. But I felt it was a good place. It was a place that was very much needed in my life at that time, and very much needed in San Francisco at that time. It attracted lots of artists, all kinds of very famous people were in and out of Glide at different points, and I could rattle off a list and you'd recognize some of the names. But one person in particular who spent a lot of time at Glide was Maya Angelou. All right, now Maya Angelou was originally from St. Louis, but as a young woman came to San Francisco and she became all kinds of things. She was a dancer, professional dancer, very active in civil rights activities, starting at really in the late 40s, early 1950s. Of course, she became a poet, a playwright. Maya Angelou did all kinds of things. She said a lot of things to the congregation when she was there, but one of the things I remember in particular was, people will forget what you said. Some of you probably know this saying already. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But what's the rest of it? Whoops. They're never going to forget how you made them feel. Okay. And that starts not at the moment when they cross the threshold, sometimes even when they're out in the street just looking at the building. Sometimes just the architecture, the decorations. People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they won't forget how they made you feel. I learned a lot of things at Glide. So Glide, for example, was the first place, in at least a religious setting, where I ever saw the use of slides. I learned about that. Something else I learned about good religion, artist activism at Glide, was the importance of music. All right, now, in a traditional church, of course, you might have a stage like this. You traditionally have 3 chairs. Okay, now listen very carefully, James. Okay. One chair is for visiting dignitaries. So if the president of our national association comes here, or maybe Pope Leo or someone comes, there will be a chair for that person. Okay. The second chair is for the minister, so I get a chance to sit down if I'm the minister. Who do you think gets the third chair? That gentleman does. And, happens to be a gentleman for us, okay. It's the song leader, typically the choir director, who's often in charge of music. And for years and years and years, the head of music at Glide was John Turk. All right. And the Glide Ensemble Band was behind him, and a choir that stretched like that. And the music was powerful. Okay, maybe too powerful for this microphone. Now, okay, I'm going to back off just a little bit. Okay. There's a song that they still sing at Glide, and I don't remember all the words, but it just, do not pass me by. Do not pass me by. This was sung by a lot of people who have been passed by in life. People with disabilities, people who are homeless, people with substance abuse problems, sex workers, all kinds of people have been passed by. You knew there was a lot of heart in that song. And I learned a few other things at Glide too. Up on the rooftop, there was a garden. This is in the middle of the city. First rooftop garden I ever saw. And there were beehives. So we could tell the bees whatever we wanted to tell them. The second religious place that really made an impression on me was the old Jesuit center near what was then Boston City Hospital. I moved to Boston. Now, my father's people were all very devout Roman Catholics. I didn't want to become a Roman Catholic. I was very wary of Roman Catholics at that point in my life, certainly priests. But I went into that place, and I can remember the smells. Okay, candle wax, old candles, dust. Even lamp oil, you can smell that. I thought, this really is an old place. I'm not sure I want to be here, This is my grandparents' religion. And then I saw a rainbow flag. A rainbow flag in a Jesuit center? That seemed rather interesting. Maybe I'll stick around a little bit. And I did. I became a teacher at night school and helped out with a few things. But I never became a Catholic. I moved on to other things. Third place, I'd like to mention Charles Street Meeting House in Boston. It was an old African-American church which had somehow become a Universalist church. This is sort of on the far side of Beacon Hill. And like Glide Memorial in San Francisco, participation was down to just a handful of people when Ken Patton showed up in the late 1940s. So this was well before my time. Ken was a young Universalist minister, but very much an artist activist. Ken rearranged the furniture. He took down old pictures which were no longer relevant. He wanted the symbols of every faith tradition imaginable. He made the symbols himself out of copper. He was quite a craftsman. And they were displayed all over. And he was always looking for the one universal symbol that would bring everybody together. And he said he never figured out what it might be. Maybe a picture of Mother Earth, and a picture of the atom as he imagined it. But he tried to bring everybody into the picture. And back in those days, so we're talking 1950s, 60s, a bit later even, Unitarianism and Universalism were pretty stuffy, all right? Some congregations, there was either no music or very little. There really wasn't much for artwork. Ken was doing dancing, literally in the middle of Sunday services. First maypole dance I ever saw was with Ken. This was long before the days of pagans in UU churches. Ken was into all of that. He really taught Unitarian Universalists. In fact, I think one of the commentators did say he taught us how to dance. Okay, just how to loosen up a bit, and just really enjoy the celebration of life. Sermons are still important, of course, but Ken reached way beyond that. Okay. This tradition of artist activism, of wanting everybody to be creative and to have opportunities to tell their stories and to listen to others, goes way back. But a person I especially want to mention, William Morris. Okay. William Morris is an Englishman born in 1832, who lives into the 1890s, so this is quite a ways back. He's born into a prosperous family. Initially, he's a bit like Charles Darwin in some ways. He sort of wanted to be a clergyman initially, but there was one barrier. He was an atheist. I'd not recommend it. He decided to become an artist instead, and we would say artist activist. Together with John Ruskin and some other names that could be mentioned, this is the guy who invented the arts and crafts movement, or at least who resurrected it, put it that way. I think you're all familiar with arts and crafts. Okay, so we're talking about pottery, handmade furniture, embroidery, all sorts of things where craftspeople, women and men, work as equals just to make something that's expressive. Okay, the Industrial Revolution comes in the 1800s, and suddenly you have all these people just stamping out stuff, mass production, no heart, no soul. They just want to go home at 5 o'clock, And Morris says it doesn't have to be that way. We can all become artists, and we should all be encouraged to be artists, and we can form communities and just be together. And he said it can be a continuous picnic, is the term that he used. All kinds of things come out of that arts and crafts experience, and if you want to understand it better, go across the bay to St. Petersburg, because there is a wonderful arts and crafts museum there which tells the story of how that movement developed. And there's even some messages that are relevant today. So it's not just something that exists in the past. Folk singing, for example, becomes enormously important to the arts and crafts people. You want to understand art activism, what it looks like in modern times? Go over to the Arts and Crafts Museum, because that will help with an introduction. And folk music, too, becomes very important in all of this. Now, how do you become an artist activist? Well, you're certainly needed in this day and age. Just like West Virginia, there's a lot of grief in Florida right now. A lot of apprehension, a lot of confusion. People not sure what's going to happen next. Just try to respond to the moment. How do you become an artist activist? Well, get some chalk, okay? Make your mark in the world. There's one person over in St. Pete, all he or she has been doing, I don't know who they are, where they are, no, it's not me, just in certain critical places making a chalk mark as to where the floodwaters were during recent hurricanes, and maybe making an appropriate comment. If you want to draw a picture of a fish or whatever, I guess you can do that. Just expressing, this feeling, maybe things are not quite right here. You want the water to be that high on Main Street? Okay. What's it going to look like this year? That's one way to be an artist activist, I suppose. I've mentioned mural paintings, and the slides included some murals in St. Petersburg. But I'm going to suggest there's another way to be an artist activist. You can join this congregation. Choirs. That's where you get to sing your songs. Make decisions about what you want to sing, how you want to do it. Do you have an art gallery here? Have you done that? Okay. You might do an art display, maybe a couple of times a year, or maybe it's all year. You might include children's art. Ways that people have expressed themselves. A poetry reading contest. Not a contest, but at least an event, a festival. You might go outside with bits of chalk. Encourage children to do their chalk designs on the pavement. See what happens. And the culinary arts, that's the way many people express themselves. It's how Ashley Dalzell expressed herself. She was a first-rate baker. Apparently she learned during COVID-19. I've noticed many people learned how to bake because of the COVID experience. Ashley was one of them. She did other things too. Was active with Montessori schools and was developing a coloring book for children. There's lots of ways. But look for religious places that welcome you as you are, that want to hear your story, and that give you opportunities to listen to others. And if you can do that, you too will be an artist activist, and you may enjoy the experience. Blessed be. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime, and therefore we are saved by hope. Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history, and therefore we are saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone, and therefore we are saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our own view. And therefore we are saved by the final type of love, perhaps the most important, and that is called forgiveness. Blessed be. Words from Reinhold Niebuhr.